Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. First of all, Presiding Officer, I think just a wee comment regarding Richard Leonard. Mr Leonard, devolution limits ambition, not independence. And a comment to Mr Mara. Mr Mara spoke in his earlier comments regarding the fiscal framework, and if Labour were to win the next UK election, there should be further discussions. But what Mr Mara didn't say was that more money would actually come to Scotland with those future discussions. Now, Presiding Officer, we have heard a lot today across the Chamber, and it will come as no surprise that I certainly will not be supporting some of the amendments, but actually all the amendments that we've got in front of us. I note that the Lib Dem amendment speaks positively about the Smith Commission report of 2014. This will be the same Smith Commission that in section 18 does not prevent, and I quote, Scotland becoming an independent country in the future should the people of Scotland so choose. It's a pity that the Lib Dems are on the same page as other pro-union parties wanting to prevent people in Scotland from actually having their say. Now, first of all, I do welcome the modest or limited improvements in the fiscal framework, such as the indexed per capita mechanism for calculating block grant adjustments to be adopted on a permanent basis, the amount the Scottish Government can borrow to mitigate against the errors in forecasting to increase from £300 million to £600 million, with no limits to the amount that can be drawn from the Scotland Reserve, and also the borrowing and reserve limits to grow in line with inflation. However, the sad reality of the situation is that these changes will not be able to protect Scotland and our economy or social fabric in the years ahead. Only independence and access to the full range of powers will be able to do that. Now, since the fiscal framework was agreed in early 2016, it has been thoroughly stress-tested. Okay?
Michael Mara.
Does Stuart McMillan not recognise, as along with any objective academic looking at this, there would be significant immediate fiscal costs to independence? We're having a fiscal debate here, a little bit of honesty, between £10 and £14 billion immediately in terms of the amount of money available to Scotland.
Stuart McMillan.
I look at the situation that we have actually had, certainly going back to the 1970s. The amount of money that Scotland, additional money Scotland's put into the Treasury in comparison to what we've actually received back. So I know that independence is the only way forward for Scotland. The only way for Scotland to actually deal with many of the issues that we face as a society. It's not with the limited powers of devolution, and it's certainly not the situation we had pre-devolution when all the powers were reserved to Westminster. I generally do believe that it was right that the arrangements actually were reviewed. And they're taken together and within the context of the narrowly scoped review that was on offer, these are meaningful but limited improvements to the framework and the financial management tools that are available to the Scottish Government. And we shouldn't lose sight of the scale of the fiscal challenge in the aftermath of the COVID pandemic, the ongoing costs of living crisis and the urgent need to tackle the climate change, in addition to also the fact we've had such an economic shock because of Brexit brought on by the Tories. And all the changes to the framework are welcome, they are not the size needed to offset the broader fiscal challenge that we actually face. This requires action by the UK Government. Now, the Scottish Government will still need to make tough choices in the context of a poorly performing UK economy and the constraints of devolution to ensure that finances remain sustainable. But sadly, Scotland is once again at the mercy of poor UK Government decisions that compound the pressures on our public finances and increase the misery that struggling households face. Now, neither Rishi Sunak nor Keir Starmer will change course from the damaging Westminster policies that got the UK into this mess in the first place. And as a result of the UK Government's disastrous handling of the economy, projected growth is just 0.7% next year. And inflation is still running at more than twice the UK Government's target. Now, living standards are forecast to be 3.5% lower in 2024-25 than pre-pandemic. And this would be the largest reduction in real living standards since records began in the 1950s. Now, ultimately, Presiding Officer, Westminster is holding Scotland back. The Brexit is making us poorer, and continued Westminster control is making the situation worse. Now, this week alone, we heard from Labour Sir Keir Starmer, the newest member of the Margaret Thatcher fan club. And he said, and I quote, "Anyone who expects an incoming Labour government to quickly turn on the spending taps is going to be disappointed." He also said, this Parliament, that's the UK Parliament, is on track to be the first in modern history where living standards in this country, i.e. the UK, have actually contracted. Household income growth is down by 3.1% and Britain is worse off. And I'm sure I generally am sure that I will encourage many people in Scotland to pay attention to this particular point. And I know this will actually change the minds of many people in Scotland when it comes to the issue of independence. Keir Starmer also said, this is Britain going backwards. This is worse than the 1970s, worse than the recessions of the 1980s and 90s, and worse even than the Great Crash of 2008. Presiding Officer, with an economic record like this, going back to the 1970s according to Labour, but to the 1950s according to the official records, why on earth would Scots want to continue living in a political environment where the only thing that's going to be guaranteed is for more poverty, desperation and misery that is so prevalent within this so-called union? Britain is bankrupt, and it's also broken. It's also morally bankrupt. We consider a lot of the policies that the Tories have actually brought on, and brought on many of our people in our country. One example in particular is the WASPI women. They've been robbed of their pensions, and that's absolutely shocking. Presiding Officer, I certainly mean I could go on, but I know I do not have the time. So this fiscal framework, it may help a little, but it still falls far short of what is needed, and that is independence. Thank you.